But first tonight, we start with a world exclusive. A new classified intelligence report has been handed to the White House on the origins of COVID-19. The document has been prepared by the Office for the Director of National Intelligence, Hines. It's an updated intelligence assessment on how the COVID-19 pandemic began. I can exclusively reveal it was handed to the White House mid-last week, just 5 days ago. Key members of Congress also have access to it. I can reveal that included in this new classified report is research by scientists that the DNA of illegally traded raccoon dogs was found at the Wuhan wet market. The research was prepared by a group of scientists, some of whom have been accused of activism and have long held the view that COVID-19 is a virus of natural origin. The findings are contested and rely on Chinese data. It's also a preprint, and senior figures are perplexed that it has found its way into such a high-level intelligence document when it hasn't yet been peer-reviewed and is so speculative. Now, this is the second classified report on the origins of COVID-19 to be handed to the White House just this year. The first report revealed that the US Energy Department had shifted its position to conclude a lab leak was most likely responsible for the pandemic. The Wall Street Journal reported that exclusively in February. After this first classified report was handed to the White House and members of Congress, some senators wrote to the Director of National Intelligence asking for more detail. This new classified report that I'm revealing tonight, handed to the White House just 5 days ago, was most likely DNI's attempt to share more information with Congress before they are forced to declassify it. Now, the first Intel report was understood to be very short, very basic, lacking in detail about why the various intelligence agencies had reached their conclusions on how the pandemic started. This new one provides more insight into the rationale. This classified report is longer. It's understood to be at least 10 pages long, and it's not as general. Confidential sources tell me that this new classified report contains more detail on how each of the intelligence agencies reached their assessments on how the pandemic started. Now, 4 agencies say a natural transmission from an animal is more likely. 2 agencies, the Department of Energy and the FBI, say a lab leak probably started the pandemic, and the CIA and 1 other agency remain undecided. FBI Director Christopher Wray explained why his agency's view is that COVID-19 started with a lab leak. He gave these comments in an interview with Fox News just last month.
The FBI has for quite some time now assessed that the origins of the pandemic are most likely a potential lab incident in Wuhan. You know, the FBI has folks, agents, professionals, analysts, virologists, microbiologists, et cetera, who focus specifically on the dangers of biological threats, which include things like novel viruses like COVID, and the concerns that in the wrong hands, some bad guys, a hostile nation state, a terrorist, a criminal, the threats that those could pose. So here you're talking about a potential leak from a Chinese government-controlled lab.
My sources say that the new classified report has new supporting details which add context and explain why the agencies had reached their various positions. While no agencies are understood to have significantly shifted their positions in this classified report, there is some new information about when their positions were reached. But this is still a summary, and I'm told it still does not have enough detail. It still has not provided the individual assessments from each agency. This is what a group of American senators have written to Hines asking for. They write, "We write to request that you immediately deliver to Congress each IC assessment used and relied upon by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence for its consensus publications. We request the actual individual IC element assessments to include memoranda, emails, interim and final assessments provided by each IC element, and any other information considered. They write, Congress should be able to review the independent evaluations without filters, ambiguity, or interpretations of the intelligence. This letter, signed by Senators Joni Ernst, Roger Marshall, Susan Collins, Roger Wicker, Chuck Grassley, Rick Scott, Marsha Blackburn, and Mike Brown. They also make a very important point, that the US government is being no more transparent than the Chinese Communist Party. They write, the COVID-19 origins investigation has been obfuscated by the Chinese Communist government's lack of cooperation. We in the American public expect better behaviour from our own government. The letter states, scientists and governments initially claimed that the virus most likely began in animals and crossed the zoonotic threshold to humans. Scientists who questioned this prevailing view were silenced, medical journals refusing to publish their research. Now, 3 years on, scientists are engaged in vigorous debate about the genetic sequencing of SARS-CoV-2 and what it indicates about the virus's origin. And US President Joe Biden has ordered that intelligence relating to the origins of COVID-19 be declassified in 90 days, a move that passed unanimously in Congress. This intelligence should be detailed, and the individual assessments from each agency should be provided transparently. The United States is a democracy. Australia is a democracy. We all have a right to know how this pandemic started.